So I wanted to talk with you today, and here's the agenda. I'm going to give you, I'm going to spend 3 minutes on my background because it's relevant to how I'm talking to you today. Then I'm going to move into precision measurement, and then I'll talk about metrics and analytics. So all of this is relevant. So let's start off with my background. This is me way back. I was a child of the 70s and had a great time growing up. And as part of growing up in Youngstown, Ohio, I think I was like many other kids where, back then you had 4 channels. One was PBS, and the other were the 3 major networks. And I loved Star Trek. I loved the idea that you could aspire to be something greater. The other thing that I really loved was the Super Friends. Yes, I was a kid back then, and the campy 1970s Super Friends was really cool. So I had a lot of the things that I was watching influenced me. And of course, one of the things that influenced me is my predilection to now go to Comic-Con and dress up. Yes, that's a thing. That's my daughter. I do that, and I guess sometimes you never grow up. I also, as I started growing up, I love TV. Maybe some of you remember Quincy with Jack Klugman, and it was really cool watching the show because this was the precursor to House. If you watch House, those programs were about using science, using this detective work to solve problems and to help people. That really resonated with me. When I was in 12th grade, I had an intro to psychology class, and this was the book that they had us read. And the book was the content was about psychoanalysis, and that part, as I went into college, I learned wasn't a fruitful path. But what was cool is the story, and the story really reached me because it was this therapist there was this young boy, he couldn't talk, and through the power of psychology, it showed how through time, all of these steps were being done. And at the end, the child's talking, and it was really remarkable. So that all influenced me. And in fact, when I was out of high school, this is a picture of Woodside Receiving Hospital, and this is a mental health institution. This has been long torn down, but I volunteered there, and I had my first instance of working with people that had very strong disabilities, and they were strongly impacted by those disabilities. So I went on in Youngstown State, and that's Steve Graff. He was my mentor. I got my BA in psychology, and I learned about general psychology because that's what you do when you're an intro to psych major. I learned about behavior analysis, which was remarkable, and I also learned about precision teaching. It was just dumb luck that I ran into Steve. Someone that could teach me about behavior analysis and precision teaching. And I love behavior analysis and precision teaching so much, I said, Steve, where do I go to learn more about this? And he said, you ought to go to Ohio State. So I did. I went to Ohio State, and that's my next mentor, which is John Cooper. And I got my degree, and I learned more about behavior analysis. I learned more about precision teaching. And because it was a special education program, I shifted from psychology to special ed. I graduated, and then I worked for a few years. This is a picture of an institution where I worked with adults and young children, and they all had traumatic brain injuries. So I was able to apply behavior analysis and precision teaching, and I had really good outcomes. And I had these great outcomes not because I thought there's anything special about me. I just listened to my advisors. I did what was told, and guess what? When you have evidence-based, science-based curricula, if you follow it and it says if you do these things, the probability of this will happen, that's what happened to me. So I was smart enough to listen to people who were smarter than me, had a great time, and as I looked around and talked to people, I discovered that nobody knew about the things that I was doing. Some people heard about behavior analysis. Nobody heard anything about precision teaching. So I decided I'm going to go back and get my doctorate. And of course, there was only one place for me, and that was to go back to Ohio State. I worked with Coop again, and I learned more about behavior analysis, precision teaching, and special education. Once I got my degree, I landed a job, and I've been at Penn State since 2000. That's myself and my daughter. And yes, it's true. When you're at Penn State, this is a very isolated community because this is the only thing around. Everybody wears everything Penn State. Half my wardrobe says Penn State. It's really a cool community here, and everyone loves the university. I worked with master's students. I worked with doctoral students. I have been presenting at conferences. I do presentations. I'll do posters. I publish articles out there. I engage in as much scholarship as I can. I've written books. By the way, I know you want to know how you find this book to buy for you and all your loved ones. Just go to precisionteachingbook.com. There it is. And I also have been working with lots of organizations. I worked with a school and had remarkable results. But even though I've been doing all of these things, what I found is it's not enough. I want to make a global impact. I want many people using it. And what I've learned is that if you show people a better way, normally that improvement will reside just with the people you work with. So I still share all of those things that I taught, all of that idealism that I grew up with. When I was working with Steve Graff, I read Dick Malot's book. It was the second edition back then, and the notion of saving the world with behavior analysis resonated with me, and that still is part of my character. So what I did is I formed a company with my colleague called Chartlytics, and this was our way of approaching the world differently. If writing articles isn't inspiring people to do these things that are working well, if writing books isn't going to do it, if working directly with schools isn't going to do it, having a business might be the answer. So where I am now in my career is I'm still at Penn State, but I've been working a lot with Chartlytics, and I'm moving that company forward. And this is a way that we can reach lots of people. And because it's through business, people pay for what they value. And it's a very different dynamic than producing information. I'm still going to do those other things, but Chartlytics has taught me a lot. And one of the services that we have with Chartlytics is we go out, we do workshops, and we teach people about precision measurement. And what I'm going to discuss next is something that you all, I feel, will find very relevant in what you're doing. I don't have a lot of experience in the OBM world. I've had classes on OBM. I've talked with a lot of smart people in the OBM world, but that's about the extent of it. My work has been has focused on people with autism. I've worked a lot with younger students. I have moved into middle-aged and adults. I've also done not just autism, but also, as I mentioned earlier, people with traumatic brain injuries, intellectual disabilities, learning disabilities. I had a lot of experience in the special education world. And now I find myself asking different questions and working with different people. So precision measurement, what is it? All of you that are interested in changing behavior, I get paid for helping people learn how to change behavior, and I have some situations where people pay me directly to help change behavior. Behavior is our starting point. This is our currency. How do we move that behavior? Well, we do some kind of intervention. All of you are going to be interested in behavior change, because if you can change behavior, that means that you are creating these outcomes. Any kind of outcome that we want, whether it's a financial outcome, a health outcome, whatever those outcomes are, it starts with behavior, with people doing things. And you do an intervention, and you need to know if that intervention, if I'm applying that intervention, how well does it work? Well, here's the framework that people need to pay attention to. You start off with labeling that behavior. If you want to change behavior, you must start with labeling it. From there, if you have a really good label, then you can move into having, you detect the behavior, then you observe it. And when you observe it, if you observe it well, you'll have a count. And from that count, you can record that data in different ways. And that record, that data that's born from this process, is going to go on to a visual display. From the visual display, you're going to analyze the data, and action will then occur. And that action will be the decisions that you make. This process is incredibly significant. If this process is not done right, you will not know how well that intervention is working. People will linger, people will fail, and if people do succeed, you won't have enough information to understand how well did that thing that you did, that intervention, work. So I have spent a large part of my career coming to understand this process and working with people and showing them how can you squeeze the most information from this. So let's take a look at this decision-making framework. There are what I'm going to call legacy measurement systems in place right now. And by legacy measurement, I mean things that have been around and that are now of questionable value. Some of these things that I'm going to share with you, you may be surprised because they are very popular in our field. And just because something is popular doesn't mean it's the best thing that we can be doing. So here are some legacy measures in terms of labeling the behavior. General labels and using operational definitions. I do a workshop. I do 2 different ones right now, and each one is about this process in showing people what are the significant issues with operational definitions. I'll talk briefly about each one of these, but I don't have time to, right now, in the time that we all are going to share together, to dig deep and show you all the issues with operational definitions. But there are issues there. Another legacy, I am going to talk about it right now. So here's an article that came out. If any of you are interested in this, hit me up at rick@chartlytics.com and I will send this to you. Or Dennis, if there's a way for me, if you have show notes, I can send this to Dennis, and then Dennis can share this with all of you. Either way, if you're interested in this article, let me know. And what this article did is it looked at how well do people detect behavior when they're using an operational definition. And it was a comparison study. It was a comparison of operational definitions and something that we do in precision teaching called movement cycles. And if you look to the left, you can see when it was given to the participants, their ability to detect the target behavior with accuracy came to like 37–38%. When you look on the right, the precision teaching term was almost at 70%. This is significant because I won't say everyone, many people are using operational definitions, and people take it that that's the gold standard that we should be using, but it creates problems. Also, another legacy issue is when you observe behavior, when you count behavior, people use incomplete observation schedules, and the big thing that they do is what's called discontinuous observation. Back in the 80s, we have known that we know this now, but that this information hasn't changed people's behavior. Discontinuous observation simply means that when you observe a behavior, if you have 5 minutes, if you observe that behavior for the full 5 minutes, that's continuous observation. You're observing it for the whole time. But if you do discontinuous observation, it means that you're going to sample from that time frame, and partial interval recording, momentary time sampling. Those are examples of that. And what they concluded was that on conceptual and empirical grounds, using this discontinuous observation is inherently inaccurate. It's inherently inaccurate. We know this. People now know this. And continually to use these will retard the discovery of clinical or experimentally important functional relations. So this is a really big issue. And as you can see, as I'm laying this out, these are legacy measures that are happening right now. So all of you that work with clients, you're getting paid for behavior change. What are you wrapping your interventions? What system are you using? The third thing is when you have your record, many people use what are called dimensionless quantities. So let's say you are interested in teaching somebody a skill. We're working with high schoolers, college students. We're teaching them to solve logic problems. This guy got 100%. This woman got 100%. And I said to you, well, which one did better? With the dimensionless unit, the problem is it completely ignores time. The first guy got 10 correct in 15 minutes, where she did 10 correct in 5 minutes. This is an issue. Reliance on dimensionless quantities means we are leaving information on the table. This, if we're using percent, it ignores the dimension of count in time. Here's another thing I'll talk to you about, which is non-standard linear graphs. We take this data and we want to make sense of what's happening. We put it on a visual display, and our preferred way of understanding what's happening is we use these non-standard linear graphs. Here's an example. Put some data in there, and we draw a line through it, and we analyze that line. We say, is it going up? Is it flat? Is it going down? Now, what happens because we have a non-standard linear graph, people do stuff like this. They stretch out the vertical axis. Look what happened to the slope of the line. Immediately, it has been exaggerated. Now, just because we've extended the vertical axis, we now have a more favorable picture. It looks as if our data are growing faster than it did before. Conversely, if you look at journal articles, people will do this. They need to do a multiple baseline, and they need to get 5 things on the page. So they squish, they depress the vertical axis, and now look at the slope of the line. Now all of a sudden, from something that looked like it was going up very quickly, looks much more modest. This is an issue. Here's another, well, which one's the right line? Technically, if you know about graph construction, that middle line is the right line because there are actual rules to how you're supposed to scale the vertical to the proportional axis. But if people don't know about this, and people are, if you're working with a client, or if you have someone working for you that's doing this axis manipulation, your data is compromised. Your ability to make decisions is compromised. Here's another issue that you can see that happens all the time in journals. How do you make your data look prolific? Well, you do some scaling on that vertical axis. This is done by 0.5. Look what happens when we rescale it and go to 10. Oh boy, my data doesn't look good at all there. That's an issue. Here's another issue. Legacy issue with analysis. I've done a study, and it's very limited. When we look at how are you supposed to analyze your data, you look at our textbooks, you look at articles, and you're supposed to look at level, trend, and variability. We did research, and we're going to publish this soon, where we looked at 45 Java research articles that had to meet our criteria of a research graph. And what we found is when we look at people who are supposed to describe their data, only 22% of people use level. That alone suggests that people are not valuing using that. And look at trend. Less than 3% of the people actually did a trend analysis. In terms of variability, 2%. I was shocked when I saw these because I assumed that people would be looking at their data more, but they're not. And then, of course, decision-making is absent or unclear. So this is a legacy measurement, and I share this with you because you all, in your capacity of applying, going into organizations and looking at the behavior, if you're using this legacy measurement, then what's coming out the other side? What are you dealing with? How are you going to make meaningful decisions when you can be compromised or data can be left on the table. What I'm here to share with you, and this is what I do professionally, this is what I'm doing with my company, is teaching people about precision measurement. And I'm not going to go through all of this because it's elegant and it's exquisite and we don't have the time, but I am going to tell you what it is, and I'm going to talk about one component of this so we can get into metrics and we can get into analytics. We teach people how to pinpoint behavior. Pinpointing behavior is very different from using operational definitions. Harkening back to Skinner, who defined behavior as action and movement, looking at all of our textbooks, pinpointing leverages action, movement, and puts it in a standard framework and helps people come up with something that is going to be uniform across the organization, that will be highly detectable and easy to communicate to people. Also, observing and counting. We show people how to use continuous observation. Continuous observation is something that we should all be doing, because if we don't, what we're saying is it's okay to have inaccurate data, that it's okay to accept data that's not representative of the true character of data. When data occurs in time, we need to have measures that represent that behavior. It doesn't do us well for us to be ignoring that and to be using measures that are inferior to continuous observation. When we take that, there are actual dimensional quantities that we can have that across the organizations that we work with, across our colleagues, everybody's going to know what they are. Frequency, what some people call rate, duration, latency, count per day, all of these are dimensional quantities that we can rally around, that all of us will understand, because the unit is getting at dimensional quantities. The visual display that I'm going to talk to you about here, now that we're going to be moving into metrics, is the standard acceleration chart. The standard acceleration chart, in my opinion, for time series behavior is something all of us should be using. We should be using this across our discipline. The fact that we're not speaks to how ingrained legacy measurement is, and it also speaks to the poor job that people who have created the chart have done in teaching lots of people about the value of it. You know, people have tried, but this is not to point fingers. We're in where we are right now, and I can look at myself and look at where I've been in my career and look at how I've taught people, and there's always ways to better the science. There's always ways to empower our whole group of practitioners and the people that work under us with this powerful science. If you're using the chart, you can do amazing within and between condition analysis. You can actually have individual performance statistics, and I'll talk about that soon. And the decision making, this is a model that's being developed and being well tested and showing that it proves and provides results. Continue changing or completing. What kind of action are you going to take based off of the analysis? So this precision measurement, if you employ this within your organization, if you do this personally, you are going to do better in terms of elevating your understanding of what's happening, the decisions that you're making, because this system is based on the fundamental aspects of what we're interested in. It provides quantification of what we're most interested in. It gives you a standard way of making decisions. We are really shooting ourselves in the foot with legacy measurement. I keep doing research on this because I figure the way to impress colleagues is to show them data, to show them here are the results of adopting non-standardization, of embracing chaos, of embracing people doing things however they like. But the good news is we do have precision measurement. We can adopt it, we can change, and that's what's so, I would say, liberating, That's a good term. This is what's liberating about science. We're not beholden to anything. If you are a true scientist, a scientist practitioner, then part of your core belief must be, I'm going to go with what's ever proven scientifically. Whatever that next best thing is, science is a marketplace of ideas. And in that marketplace, whatever rises to the top are the things that we should be doing. We don't need to have allegiance or fall in love with something because this is what my professor taught me, or this is the way that most people are doing it. If something is better, we use it. And that's part of what I'm hoping resonates with you after this webinar, that you look at how can this system help you do better, make better decisions, and drive more value to your clients. So let's talk about metrics and analytics and how these are born from each one of these systems. Metrics simply refer to a standard of measure. And I'll give you some metrics in business. How often do people click on cat picture memes in 1 month? I'm sure all of you love cat picture memes. If any of you are on Facebook, you have that friend that regularly posts cat memes. I have that friend, you have that friend. If you're in business and you want to know how often this is happening, that's a metric. That standard measure, you can count how many times are people doing this in this time frame. How many Starbucks coupons do consumers download to their phone? That is another metric. This allows people, this provides people with information, and they can do a lot by having that metric. How many people submit online applications for a telemarketer job? There's all types of metrics out there. If you look at whatever your industry is, you'll find metrics that people gravitate towards because they give them very important information. Now, here's a question to think about. What are the behavior change metrics? What are the metrics that you go to? Well, if you said, I don't have a lot of metrics, or maybe you do have some, I can't see what you're saying, but this is something I'd love to hear about. What are your metrics? Metrics are born from record. And if you have dimensionless quantities and you're using legacy measurement, it's difficult to look at what kind of measures are you getting. Let me show you a video clip real quick. So I work with kids. Kid on the left is doing receptive labeling. This is 10 seconds. Car. Nice job. That's 100%. Let's give that same task to this young lady. Keys. Sorry. Comb. Soap. Airplane. All right, Cody. Comb. That was 100%. Now, if you watch this right away, you know that these performances are different. But yet, when we use that 100% as our measure, that is a very weak metric. It gives us some kind of information, but it's weak. If we use precision measurement, then we're going to use something that captures the true nature of their behavior. So let's look at frequency for both of these kids. I'll play them at the same time. So those played a little bit different clips, but you can see the difference between 5 and 10 and 10 and 10 is remarkable. You're talking about someone that is 2 times better than the other person. Here, we can have a metric that is going to be so much more valuable to us in terms of looking at that behavior. What are we learning from whatever intervention that we're using? Now, how about analysis? If we're using non-standard linear graphs, we're going to analyze that. We're going to have some issues. Here's a graph, and we put our data through that. We draw a line, and then we need to make sense of it. The way we do it in our field is we use words. We say slope is qualitatively estimated as high, medium, or low. Now, here's a question. I want you to tell me. I can't see what you're saying, so write it in your chat board if you want to. What is this line? Is this rapid, moderate, or slowly increasing? What do you think? All right, is it moderate? Is it slow? Is it rapid? How about this one? You're probably saying, well, if that other one was rapid, that first one, then this one's got to be rapid. But if you said that first one was slow, then this one could be either moderate or rapid. What about this one? What's that? Rapid, moderate, or slowly increasing? How about that? What about that? Or that? You see that we have an issue here, don't you? All of these lines that we put in there is completely subjective, and we're using words. Metrics, as we say, refer to some standard of measure. As a field, because we're using this non-standard linear graph and we're using words, our metric is a subjective vocabulary. That's a terrible way for us to do business. Slope is qualitatively estimated as high, medium, or low. I can tell you this right now. Single case design is under attack by statisticians because they decry the lack of quantitative measures in our field. And rightly so. We are missing, there's a lot of things that we should be quantifying that we're not. Now, I'm not saying that they have a solution. I'm certainly not saying that. They have had some interesting ideas, but there's a better way we can do this. And that is, rather than prop up something that's not working very well, what if we just look for a tool that's better and gives us the answers we need? That's where the standard acceleration chart comes in. Let's take a look at this. Now that we put that line through there, if you see to the left, that's called acceleration fan. Every single line on this chart is going to have a quantitative value. This line is ×2. It means that each week we can clock the speed of growth. It's 100% weekly growth. All of these lines now have a value, and we can look at how fast they're growing. Think about that for a minute. What's that going to allow you to do when you're working with your clients? Now that you can actually see how fast someone's changing, the whole world is going to open up to you, because you could go into an organization and say, at a minimum, I want everyone to learn at this rate. If they're not learning at that rate, then there's a problem. You can go in there and help the person. And if they're not learning at that rate, that gives you feedback as to how powerful your particular intervention is. You need to know about that. And if you're not using this tool, then you're going to have a hard time learning that. So acceleration is the change in frequency over time. It's a metric. It refers to a standard unit of measure. Acceleration is a behavior change metric that is not widely used, that everybody should be using. If we care about the rate of change across time, we should all be using acceleration. How fast does someone learn to correctly apply protective coatings to a product? If we want to know that, then our metric is acceleration. How fast, at what rate do accidents decelerate if you target that with some specific intervention? What other things are you interested in looking at? All of these are metrics that you can use, you can leverage if you change your tool. So here we have an intervention, whatever it is, it's going to tell a data story, and there's all these different ways of looking at what happens within that condition. Whatever you're interested in, let's take a look at this. Number of data points. So these are the 6 things that you can look at within a condition. Here are your metrics: level, acceleration, improvement index, bounce. Those 4 things are going to give you numbers. And again, I'm not going to explain these, but they're very valuable for you. Actually, I take that back. I'm going to explain two of them briefly here. If you do something, you're not happy with that intervention, you have your data that's going to move over to your next intervention. Now you still have those within condition analyses, but there's a whole set of new statistics. And all of these are analytics. There's all of these analytics that you could be using to understand your data at an incredibly intense level. You can learn so much more from what you're doing, but if you are using legacy measurement, all this is not even available to you. You're probably not even thinking about all of these things because your life has been lived within this tool that doesn't provide this type of rich level of, or this rich detail in these types of metrics. So we can keep on looking at those to understand the data. Now, analytics, the last thing I want to talk to you about today. Analytics, when we talk about analytics, this means that you're using information, data, and logical analysis to answer specific questions. So now, if we want to know, how do we get cat lovers to buy a certain toy? This is a very different kind of question from what we're getting with metrics. We would look at data, and then we would combine that with other sources to answer this question. If we wanted to know, which new flavored Frappuccino should Starbucks develop, if that's our question, we are using metrics. We're taking lots of metrics, and we're coming together with other forms of information to answer this question. How do we best answer that question? Starbucks is going to pay lots of money, millions of dollars probably, to answer this question. How about if you're interested in knowing who's going to make a really good telemarketer? This is a fundamentally different kind of question that you're asking. And now we live in a world where we can apply data in novel ways to come up with these analytics. If you're familiar with big data, big data has all kinds of analytics, and now they're starting to qualify their analytics. There's prescriptive analytics, there's predictive analytics, there's diagnostic analytics, there's descriptive analytics. All of these would take different information streams, they put them together, and through doing math at this big level, you get this information that's very powerful. Businesses are going crazy over analytics because they're powerful and they give us information. What about us? What kind of analytic information can we have? We need behavior change analytics. And what are our behavior change analytics? Has an intervention led to a really significant change? Let's say our question is, we want to know what's the most efficient way to reduce or eliminate employee theft. I work at the university, and we have a physical plant. And in that physical plant, my neighbor, he used to work at the physical plant, and he told me the big issue is people will just walk home with tools. One or two people doing this really can affect the bottom line when you have a number of people. A place like Penn State, we have a huge group of people that are working. You have a lot of people walking off with tools. Now you have tens of thousands of dollars that are being lost in money. So you do an intervention to look at the tool theft. And let's say that the intervention has to do with videotape, and you look at that intervention. You can ask survey questions, but you can also have these behavior change metrics. And depending on how sophisticated, if you're using legacy measures, that's going to give you one thing. But if you're using precision measurement behavior change measurements, and you combine those with survey questions or whatever information you want, you're going to know in a very different way, in a very deep, meaningful way, how to answer this question. If we wanted to know how fast did that intervention work, we need to use acceleration. Sure, you could put it on a linear graph and you could see it's going down, and you can say it's rapidly decreasing. But how much does that really tell you? You can't stick a number to that like we can here with acceleration. With your acceleration value, everyone who's on this system is going to instantly know how powerful that is, because these numbers are going to hold meaning to you. You might not know what a divide by 2 means versus a divide by 3 versus divide by 1.5. But once you're in the system, you will quickly, rapidly understand the power of your intervention. How smoothly did that happen? There's all this information with variability, and it's really, I'm excited with where the field can go, because people don't even understand the information that they don't know about. When you quantify bounce or variability, you're going to learn all kinds of things about your intervention. How smooth is the person? How smooth are they reacting? If you have tight bounce, you have stability. We can put numbers on it. That's going to tell you things about your intervention. And of course, level gets at the average rate. What is the average rate across different conditions? Precision measurement in metrics and analytics are going to, this is what we've talked about. Labeling and observing the behavior. That deals with detection and counting and recording. If we can detect it in that behavior well, we're going to come up with an accurate count. If you put that on your visual display, all of your questions that you ask, how you communicate to the world, that resides on your visual display. And your visual analysis is going to give you an understanding of what those numbers mean. It will provide you with real insight. And you do that so you can have action and you can have true outcomes. So if you look at this process that I've described to you, all of this deals with your data quality. In our company, Chartlytics, we want to help people come with structured data, because soon we're going to be sprinkling machine learning on our data. And if your data quality is poor, if you have error in your measurement, if you have these measures that aren't reflecting the true nature of behavior, your data quality is poor. You don't even know that because you're living in this legacy measurement system. When it comes to your visual display and your visual analysis, here, what kind of metrics do you want? What kind of metrics do you want to bring to the table? What kind of metrics do you want to bring to your clients? And this is going to help you with true analytics. I've shared some analytics right there in terms of when I work with people in behavior analysis and they're working with clients and they want to change their behavior, there's certain actions and outcomes that they will take. That might be very similar to what you're doing. So what I've shared with you, so I'm going to quit sharing this, and what I've talked with you here. Let me see. Can I stop sharing my screen? I don't know how to stop sharing my screen. But at any rate, that presentation was meant to give you all of the information on what's the difference between legacy measurement and performance measurement, and how do you use that to come up with meaningful metrics so that you all can use that information to help you do whatever it is you want to do better. Questions, comments, thoughts, ideas?
We'll open up the floor now to questions. If you haven't, you can just type them out. Rick, you're not able to unshare your screen, you said?
I'm clicking on share screen and it's not doing anything.
Maybe try something here. Hopefully I don't mess everything completely up.
Okay, kick me off, but I'm back. Thank you, Rita. Thank you. Is this valuable? Thanks, Manny. Is this valuable for what you do? Again, being new to understanding everything that you do, how do these metrics work? how could they help you? Or, well, I mean, I guess I'm interested in that. I shouldn't be the one asking questions. I should let you ask the questions. Great question, Rita. Think about it as speed and accuracy. You want to know both. If you're just interested in accuracy alone, that has meaning, but when we're looking at behavior, every single thing we do happens in time. So knowing how accurate something is and time is going to provide a higher quality information. So it's both that you want to know, if you can. Sometimes there are instances where you focus just on accuracy, but if you can't have accuracy and speed, that's good. Charts look messy, but if you learn to use them, they're great value. So the charts are very easy to learn. If you know how to use linear graphs, you're going to have no problem learning how to use the standard acceleration chart. I had the grid lines on. You can turn the grid lines off with software, and it's the same exact thing in terms of if you have a linear graph, are your dots going up? Are your X's going down? Dots are things we want to go up, X's are things we want to go down. If at that level, there's no difference between the ratio scale chart that I showed you and the linear chart, but there's so much more. And once you learn that, then all the value that it has is you'll be able to use to understand the effects of the interventions that you all are striving to put into your clients' hands. Kind of like the EKG. If you ever have thought about the EKG, once you learn to use it, immediately you'll understand the characteristic pattern of the behavior. It's going to tell you my data are doing this. And you know who else had that? This guy named Skinner. All of his stuff was standardized. Everybody who used that cumulative recorder had a standard picture. He didn't have the problems that we do now. Once we jumped from the laboratory to the clinic and to working with people, we didn't adopt Skinner's wonderful measurement system where he was using rate or frequency. He was using a standard display. We don't make enough use of those. If you all are interested in learning more about Chartlytics, we do our own webinars, and I'd like to invite all of you to our webinar. We have one tomorrow, as a matter of fact, and we have guest speakers like you do. Andrew Keita is our guest speaker. He's going to talk about Morningside. Some of you may be familiar with that. We do have a website, chartlytics.com, and I'm speaking to anyone that will listen. If you see a guy on a corner holding up a chart, that's me yelling at cars as they go by. Very excited about this information because I know in your competent hands, when you are given this tool, you're just going to do that much better because you're going to see the world differently. You'll see the world through the lens of these metrics and analytics, and you'll be able to use that to help drive value to your clients and the things that you're doing. We have about 3 minutes left, and I would entertain any other questions that you have or comments.
I have a question.
Yes.
So even in our field, a lot of practitioners kind of steer away from acceleration charts just for, purely based on looks, how complicated it looks. How can we convince business owners to invest in something like this, where they not only have to learn what this chart actually means, but learn what acceleration is? How do we convince them to go towards that?
That's a fabulous question. In our field, we have to decide, science is a human activity, and it's driven by all of us. We have to decide, what do we want to do in terms of our measurement? Do we want to continue to be using these legacy measures that are that can be potentially misleading, that are leaving information on the table, or do we want to elevate our field? If we truly want to elevate our field, then there will be ways that this is just how we do it. People in the medical field that need to learn the EKG, or how about the ECG? If you want to learn to read brainwave patterns, anyone that goes in that field learns to use those tools. And there's not even a question about it. That question that you ask is a valid question because it's an option that's on the table. People can choose to use whatever they want, and we haven't agreed as a field that we should be using the best tool possible. And you know what? My question is this to everyone, or not my question, my reply. If you don't like the chart, then find something better. Whatever that thing is, we need as a field to rally around. We need to come behind something that's going to give us the best, most meaningful data. And we should be forming groups of us should be coming together to form committees to study this. And then, your question that you ask, we use the best tool available. It's going to give us the most information. And then the training will just come because that'll be part of our DNA as a field. Really good question.
Thank you, Rick. I want to thank you for participating in my first OBM network webinar. And I know we experienced some technical issues, but I want to thank everybody for joining us for our first webinar of 2018. Please be on the lookout for our next webinar, which will be taking place at the end of February.
Thank you for having me, and thank you all for your questions. And feel free, if you ever have any questions to follow up, to email me at rick@chartlytics.com.
Thank you, Rick.
Yep. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.